Hi there everyone, once again we are with paper conservator Richard Hawkes. We've met him before and seen all sorts of bits of paper. He told us about all the work he does for various museums and dealers and collectors around the country. Well, today he's going to show us some of his magical instruments. We have some of the tools of the trade here.
Well, this is great for me. Conservators love talking about their different tools that they like to use. I guess also there's a difference between your favourite tool and also the most useful tool. When a treatment starts for a paper conservator, it's often to remove any loose dirt or dust that's on an artefact or artwork. Plastic erasers contain a plasticizer and, are very effective, sometimes almost too effective at cleaning dirt away. This is an expanded rubber sponge. The good thing about it is it tends to lift and trap the dirt on it.
So you'll just like have some precious document and you just be gently rubbing it like this way?
Yeah, cutting off smaller pieces, working a little, you can see a little piece being cut out here.
Okay.
Just to work at a time.
What else might you be using here?
Well, I think backing removals are something that paper conservators are very preoccupied with. When I say backing removal, what I mean is we're taking off the old mount board that an artwork has been stuck down to. That's usually made from wood pulp, but it might be made from some other material like straw board or a cotton fibred board. Generally, these boards, when they're manufactured, have a series of laminates that are pasted together. So it is possible to go in with a tool and just split down the laminates so that you can begin to thin it down. The different types of tool one could use vary enormously. I should start with my own favourite one actually, which is made from an early plastic called ivorene. Ivorene was made to resemble ivory, but this one was made probably as a letter opener by a company that supplied shotgun cartridges and given out to clients in the mid-20th century. I've done a little bit of manipulation to thin it down further, but it has just the right flexibility to get down between the laminates of the mount board and split.
Will you trust me with it for a moment?
Well, you can have a look at that. It's pretty indestructible, but I can trust you because it's so important to me. I've actually bought 4 others I've got in the box just in case it ever breaks.
But this is the one that you've got just the way you want it.
Exactly, yes, and I've had that for nearly 30 years now.
Just a little extra tidbit of information that Richard was telling us earlier. He says it came from a shotgun company. One of the main uses you said was for them to be able to open the boxes of shotgun cartridges.
Yeah, possibly.
Like, it's the only use you could have that's more obscure than what you use it for.
There are other types you can use. That's made from Teflon. This one is a piece of bamboo. That's a bone letter opener there. And of course, sometimes ivory itself. These are antique ivory letter openers that I bought at antique markets. When I started work, I worked at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And one of my jobs was to cut the window mounts for mounting and framing artworks. When I first started, mounts were all cut by hand, and this was a technique that was developed at the British Museum and had carried over into 1 or 2 other British galleries and museums. And the tools were made by a colleague basically as a little wooden handle with a brass ferrule on the end. It's a little hacksaw blade that's been shaped. So if one side was for cutting the mount, you would have a steel straight edge and you would have to lock your hand into a sort of 45-degree angle and then just cut gradually through a thick sheet of mount board to get the nice beveled window aperture. And then the other side would be turned around and could be put into a little leather handle for shaping the edges of repairs, to just shave the paper fibres off to get a nice chamfered edge to a repair. It is part of the sort of history of conservation in British museums. And this is something that's getting harder to find because this is a typewriter eraser. Although it's slightly aggressive in that it can begin to disrupt the surface of the paper, it's a very good tool for just moving off little fingerprints and surface deposits.
They look like dentist tools.
They are, in the way that a dentist would use these for applying a filling into a tooth. What I would do is sometimes use paper pulp. There's an example here actually. This is from cotton cellulose powder, and it can be mixed with an adhesive and a little bit of water to make a paste and then used to fill small holes. And the holes in paper are usually those caused by woodworm or the larvae of furniture beetle, where it's too small to make a paper patch for, but you want to use a little paste. And these dental tools are just ideal for manipulating the paste into position, just as a dentist would.
So you're literally doing fillings, but fillings for paper?
Exactly.
I bet a lot of people watching at home are getting chills right now, looking at these.
Obviously, there are brushes for all sorts of purposes. This is a beautiful looking brush. These are just used for moving loose dirt and dust, again, in surface cleaning. But also we have to use quite a lot of solvents and water-based chemicals for treating art on paper. Some of those are easily destabilized by contact with metal, and we have to consider even the stainless steel ferrules on brushes can become corroded and can cause problems with the bleaching agents. So these were found actually from a German company that supplied plastic ferruled brushes. They're not expensive, they're almost used for children's art, but they're perfect for me for using with those bleaching agents.
Let's go and look at some of your other toys over here. So here we are at the sink, and the sink's a very important place for you, isn't it, Richard?
Absolutely, because a lot of the treatments I do involve water. This one's made from stainless steel, they could be made from polyethylene as well, and it will take items nearly about 2 meters long.
When I'm in the bath and reading a book, I've learned the worst thing that can happen is getting water on my book. It ruins the paper, it ruins the pages, and like, to me, paper and water don't mix, and yet I see people that do your job with these super expensive documents dunking them in water. How do you get away with this?
Well, don't forget, of course, that water is used in the making of paper, that you start with a paper pulp. So you're reintroducing that water in order to solubilize some of the discoloration products, but also to try and raise the pH of the paper as well and introduce some possibly magnesium or calcium salts that help prolong the life of the paper. So when the paper is wet, we take great care to handle it using a wet support material such as polyester. And then after it's dried, obviously the paper will be quite cockled, but it's possible to then gently humidify it and flatten it out between boards or within the press.
What else have we got here? I know this is a favourite of yours.
Well, it's a favourite. It's also, despite its small size, it's one of the more expensive pieces of equipment. It's a little glass reagent sprayer. The beauty of this is it gives a very fine mist, but you can have a little look there. You can see a little mist coming out. Just water in there at the moment.
It's like a cloud.
This one being all glass, even within the spray nozzle, means that I have no adverse chemical reactions taking place whilst it's in the sprayer.
Now this looks like something you should be using to cook Japanese dumplings or something.
A lot of the repair and lining techniques used by paper conservators are based on a tradition of Japanese scroll mounters. So we adapt and have evolved some of the techniques that they use to suit our purposes with Western art. This is actually seen quite a lot of life, but it's a Japanese paste bowl, and it's great for putting the wheat starch paste in and working out any lumps and bumps against the grain of the wood. My sieve is not a traditional Japanese sieve. The traditional Japanese ones have a horsehair sieve on top. This is obviously a plastic one.
Or a very unusual horse.
Exactly. But I would use that to initially sieve the wheat starch paste into the bowl and then work it first with a rice paddle against the wood and then probably with one of these brushes, a paste brush.
Now before you all get excited about paddles and ancient Japanese relics that Richard here is using, tell us about this thing here. This is the opposite end of the spectrum.
Probably more likely to be seen in a kitchen. This is a little sauce maker. When you make Japanese wheat starch adhesive, it has a very prolonged cooking time, so you'd need to be stirring it for perhaps 3/4 of an hour to an hour. Paper conservators discovered Tefal's saucier as a great labour-saving device to make the paste. Unfortunately, nowadays they're not made anymore, so they tend to come up on eBay and go at inflated prices. Fortunately, I managed to get one while the going was good.
So you heard it here, investors and eBay connoisseurs. If you see the Tefal saucier maker, buy it quickly, and then you'll be able to sell it to people like Richard.
There are paper conservators will spend good money on getting hold of one, yes.
Can we have a look at your giant press thing?
Certainly.
All right. Look at this, it's magnificent. What's this, Richard? What are you using this for?
Well, this is a great piece of British engineering. It's a nipping press or bookbinder's press. It was used in a process of bookbinding, so this would have been for very large volumes being bound. It would be used to hold the book together.
And what do you use it for?
Well, I use it for removing the distortions and cockling that's left in paper after any wet treatments. So if the paper is then just gently humidified by spray with water or with some ultrasonic humidity, the paper relaxes and I can then press it between boards and blotting paper in here.
Richard, I don't think I can leave today without having a turn of the handle.
Absolutely.
No, I've been dying to do this since I walked in. Oh, it's like
it moves
smooth.
very easily.
It's easy.
So this now allows you to lift up the platen. The platen is this heavy part of the press here. And all I want to do is not really screw it down tight to compress the stack. I just want to let the weight of the platen come down. So generally what one would do, if I just take this from you, is you turn it until it tightens and then just go back half a turn. So then you've taken off the pressure from this, but you're just letting the weight of that sit on top.
And I'm going to hazard a guess, this is the heaviest tool in your toolkit.
I think that's certainly true. It took 3 of us to assemble it.
We'd like to thank the Great Courses Plus for supporting this episode. The Great Courses Plus is a subscription video on-demand learning service. They've got loads of great stuff hosted by top professors and experts from all around the world. And a subscription offers you unlimited access to over 10,000 videos about pretty much any subject you can imagine. Have a look at some of these. It's really good stuff. For a free trial, go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/objectivity. The link is on the screen, and there's also a link in the video description.